Amen for that. For the ability to sing and say that it is well with our soul. I'm glad to be back. It seems like it's been a while since the last time we were together doing this, and in the meantime I've enjoyed more of what I enjoyed leading up to the Bible study we did last time. I've read more and I've really studied intently in the Old Testament. I have read and just I talked to Matthew and Whitney and Nathan and Alicia and Tutu this morning. I haven't read with the intention of just studying verse by verse, just knowing what does this verse mean and this verse. I haven't approached it that way. I've just tried to read volume. I just wanted to cover as much as I could, and I've just read in the Old Testament and just wholly devoted my study to trying to cover the entire Old Testament. That's my goal right now, is just to read it. Not to try to gain every understanding from every verse or anything. I just want to go through it. I want to know that story. I feel like we as a body of believers are much more familiar with the New Testament scriptures than we are with the Old Testament scriptures. We're much more comfortable discussing Jesus and the way that the way that we now interact with God through Jesus. I feel like we're much more comfortable in that setting than in understanding the way that God before Jesus interacted with his people. And the one thing that I've really the one thought that has really settled into my mind is that the God of the Old Testament is the God of the New Testament. The God has not changed. His mindset is the same. His thoughts are the same. His purpose is the same. And his ambitions are the same. And so in studying the Old Testament, we get as wonderful a perception of who this God is that we praise, that we intend to serve. And Brother Tom, I appreciate so much your prayer, just to pray to the God of wonders in heaven. Just a wonderful thought. I want to know that God more. I feel like I'm much more comfortable, like I said, with the thought of who Jesus is, where I stand in my salvation, where I stand as a child of God. I feel much more comfortable in that knowledge and understanding, but not so comfortable with how I would stand if I was in Israel during the development of Israel. I'm not familiar with the God that interacted on their behalf and that raised them up and preserved them and disciplined them and turned them over to their enemies. And it has been an amazing story to read the Old Testament, just to witness God intervening and interceding and orchestrating the Old Testament. I think that word probably defines what I have discovered most profoundly about the Old Testament, is that God is orchestrating the Old Testament. It's not that we should study the book of Daniel, which we are getting to in just a minute. We shouldn't study Daniel so that we understand Daniel's character better, so that we can more closely be more like Daniel. The book of Daniel is in this Bible for one reason, and one reason alone: to demonstrate God's glory. That's one of the points that we got to last time we met. I keep wanting to say last Sunday, but it's been a little while farther back than that. Just to refresh and to go back to where we are, we're just going to pick up where we left off from last month. And I want to say the 2 points that I said last time and continue them tonight. The 2 points that I want everybody to, as we study the book of Daniel and then any other books that come after this, the 2 thoughts that I want us to have at the forefront of our mind are these: that the salvation of God's people was not his primary ambition. He did not set out and create all of this so that there would be a people to save. He created all of this so that he could glorify himself. Part of that glorification is how he saves his people. He is gaining glory in other things as well. You don't have to just look at humanity to see the glory of God. You can look you can look in the smallest little part. You can look underneath a leaf and see all the glory of God underneath that leaf with everything that exists under there. And then you can open up your eyes to the biggest thing you can see. And all of it screams how glorious our God is. That's the primary thought that I want to focus on, is that God's ultimate ambition is to reveal himself to us, to reveal himself to creation, and to glorify himself. He didn't have to do creation. He didn't have to choose all this. But he wanted to. He chose to do all of this because he had a purpose. And that purpose, as I understand it, the best I can put my mind around it, is that he intended to glorify himself. And this is that's point one. The second part is that you can see God's glory in every single book of the Bible. That theme is what unites every book. The book of Numbers does not align very well with the book of John unless you recognize that God is glorifying himself in Numbers and God is glorifying himself in the book of John. We see different aspects in Numbers than we do in John, but in both books, that would be the unifying theme, that God is doing something that reveals what we need to know about him and his glory. One other thought that we said last week, I'm just trying to catch back up. Our life is not glorifying to God unless we are intentionally pursuing that. Like Daniel, there was a verse in the first chapter of Daniel. It said, he purposed in his heart not to defile himself. He intentionally chose to do the things that he was doing. Me and Matthew had a conversation just this afternoon riding home. As I've been working at my house, building on my house, I got one nap. He is persistent. If I could get a hold of him, I would. As I've been working on my house, there's one thing that has stuck out to me. When we first bought the land, we cleared part of it. We built a foundation. We put a house there and everything. And so we disturbed the soil. You know, we had dirt everywhere for a little while. And the one thing I've noticed, in the place of all that dirt, not one single fruit tree has grown up. Not one grapevine, not one apple tree, not one orange tree. The only thing that has grown up in my yard is weeds and briars and thorns. The girls can't walk around without shoes on. And that's a lesson to me, and it's coming out of Daniel. In this world, you don't have to plant briars. You don't have to plant thorns. You don't have to plant anything that just springs up, weeds that have no purpose. You don't have to plant them. You don't have to teach a child to lie. You don't have to teach a child to steal. You don't have to teach them to do any of those things. We don't have to try to make our bodies age and deteriorate. We don't have to try that. That's part of this natural world. That's the natural thing. The weeds are natural. The thorns are natural. Lying is natural. Stealing is natural. Getting old and dying is natural. That's what will happen when you don't purposefully intend to do something else. If you don't purposefully plant orange trees and apple trees, you won't ever have them. If you don't plant corn, corn ain't going to spring up in your yard. You have to do something that's unnatural if you want those other things. And that's the conversation Matthew and I had this afternoon about Daniel. It said he purposed in his heart to be obedient, not to become that natural state of himself that would have looked like weeds and briars and lying and stealing. He had to purpose that in his heart. So that was that's about where we left off. If you remember, Nebuchadnezzar has had a dream. He couldn't, and he didn't understand it. All of his wise men, they didn't understand it. They're the ones that came to him and told him, tell us the dream and we'll tell you what it means. And he said, and Miss Betty, I've gone back and read it several times. You're right. He couldn't tell him because he forgot it. He didn't know the dream. And so not only did he tell his wise men and his soothsayers and Chaldeans and all those things, he said, no, you tell me the dream and the interpretation of it, or I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill all of you. And I'm going to kill Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, all of them. Daniel, they came to Daniel's house. The people that were bringing the word that, Nebuchadnezzar is intending to kill you, he had come. And he said, why is King Nebuchadnezzar in such a hurry? Why is he trying to kill all these people? Tell him to stop. Tell him I'll interpret the dream. And then this is the point that we closed on the last time. He said to his friends, meet me at the house. We have to pray about this thing. And the last part that we talked about was that we should all be developing friends and relationships among our people so that when those trying times come, we can say, meet me at the house. That was the last point of last month's Bible study, was that we should have those friends that we would be able to go to in times of need and say, meet me at the house. And I'll say tonight's Bible study just starts to open up a floodgate of just depth and it's just deep stuff, and it reveals such a more challenging aspect of what God is doing. It reveals that orchestration that I was talking about. We now see Daniel is about to interpret this dream. He's coming to Nebuchadnezzar's house, to the palace. And if you all have your Bible, that was chapter 1 that I just went through. If you have your Bible and read this afternoon, hopefully, if you look at chapter 2, about the place that we should pick back up, it starts a little bit. It'll be in chapter 2, verse 11, is the response of the Chaldeans, the soothsayers and the wise men, back to Nebuchadnezzar. And those men said, it is a rare thing that the king requireth, and there is none other that can show it before the king, except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh. And I have that last part extra underlined. I have that chapter 11, verse 11 underlined in my Bible. Their response to them, to Nebuchadnezzar, he said, it's rare that you ask that of us, that you would ask that we tell you not only the dream, not only the interpretation, but the dream also. That's a hard thing for you to ask of us. Nobody else has ever asked that before. And it says there's none other except the gods. And my favorite part of this whole verse is, whose dwelling is not with flesh. Because on this side of history, we can look back and see that God has dwelt with us in the flesh. And we still get to rejoice in that. That was his response. Daniel came to him and said, I'll interpret it to you. In verse 17, you see, then Daniel went to his house and made the thing known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions. And they prayed. I imagine they prayed pretty intently. And God revealed it to them. He gave it to Daniel. And this is Daniel's response. In verses 20 through 23, it says, Daniel answered and said, blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. And he changeth the times and the seasons. He removeth kings and setteth up kings. He giveth wisdom unto the wise, and knowledge to them that know understanding. He revealeth the deep and secret things. He knoweth what is in the darkness, and the light dwelleth with him. I thank thee and praise thee, O thou God of my fathers, who hast given me wisdom and might, and hast made known unto me now what we desired of thee. For thou hast now made known unto us the king's matter. He's going with, I can't ever remember these names. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. He's gone back with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to his house. He prayed. God answered his prayers. And now Daniel has that interpretation. And until today, I never understood the depth of this vision. And I probably still don't understand the depth of it, but I never had the gravity of this vision in as broad of an understanding as I feel like I do now. It's been wonderful. My prayer today was that I could in some way speak it, what was wonderful to me, and let it be wonderful to you. His interpretation of this dream should tell us, it should enable us to say, how great thou art. Glory be to God. It should help us recognize how that this chapter of this Bible demonstrates God's glory. So I'm going to try my best to do it. In chapter 2, verses 27, this is where we start to see Daniel's approach to life. We've already seen him say, I will not eat the king's food. I will not defile myself in the easy way. It would have been easy for Daniel to have just done what everybody else had done and become a Babylonian. But he didn't. For some reason, Daniel has this mentality, and it's demonstrated right here in these 2 verses. Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, the secret which the king hath demanded cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers show unto the king. They can't do it, is what he told the king. And my favorite word in the Bible, when this one shows up, you know something good is coming. But there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. The more I studied Daniel, the more I realized, and the more I've just read and understood and built on things that other people have read, Daniel is the introduction to the prophecy of the New Testament. It is Daniel that starts to break that ground and says, this is how the Gentile era is going to come to an end, and now there's going to be something. I'm not going to say it because it's going to be part of this vision. I don't want to say what's coming, but it's going to be wonderful. So here it is in verse 30. But as for me, this secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have more than any other living, but for their sakes that shall make known the interpretation to the king, and that thou mightest know the thoughts of thy heart. Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. This image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth. The more this becomes real to me and becomes, the more that I recognize not only that this is prophecy that we know has been fulfilled, we can just dig deeper and deeper into this part where God is starting something new. This is the newness. It was prophesied in Genesis that Jesus would come. It's been all through Psalms that Jesus would come. It's even in other books of the Old Testament. But this is where God is saying, this is when I'm going to do it. In this prophecy, I don't know exactly how to fulfill it. I think we should just keep reading. The first verses that I just read, that was the dream. This is Daniel turning to Nebuchadnezzar and now saying, this is what it means. There it is. This is in verse 36. This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power and strength and glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven hath he given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over all of them. Thou art this head of gold. He tells Nebuchadnezzar, what I'm painting for you is a timeline. It's not an image, it's a timeline. It says, you're the head of gold. Because we don't know, I don't know Nebuchadnezzar. I don't know what went on in his kingdom, but apparently he was the most refined. They experienced the most gold, the most, I don't know what it was. But as you go down the list, it becomes less and less refined. If you look in, that was 38, this is 39. It says, and after these shall rise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. We've gone down that image. It had a head of gold. It had shoulders and breast, arms and breast of silver. It had a third, the belly and thighs of that image was of brass. It says, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. He's saying, after you're done, there will be another. I'm calling that one silver. After the silver one, there will be another. I'm calling that one brass. After the brass one, there will be a fourth one. In verse 40, and the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron. For as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. And whereas thou sawest the feet and the toes of the toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. But there shall it be in the strength of iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with the miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron, part of clay, we're starting to get away from it. The kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And in the days of this one has been underlined in my Bible, verse 44. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. If you turn back to verse 34, he's gone through this dream. He said it has a head of gold, silver, brass, and then iron. But in verse 34, it says, thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands. It doesn't mean that the stone didn't have hands. It means it didn't take hands to cut it out. Thou sawest that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon its feet, that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces. Why did it strike the image on his feet? Because chronologically, it started with the gold. After gold was silver. It didn't come in the silver kingdom. It didn't come in the brass kingdom. It didn't come until the iron kingdom was set up. It smote the iron kingdom, which was the feet. I want to try to draw something together, and I don't know how much of it that you just need to read and study for yourself, and how much you need to that we need to just do in here. And I hate to skip around so much, but I want you to look real quick at chapter 7. It says, chapter 7, verses 1 through 7. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream, and the visions of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of the heavens strove upon the great sea, and four beasts came up from the sea, diverse from one another. Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and Daniel interpreted it to Nebuchadnezzar. Under Nebuchadnezzar's successor, Belshazzar, it says in the first year of Belshazzar, this is the next king after Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel had a dream. And his dream was this. He saw four great beasts come up from the sea, diverse from one another. The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second, like to a bear, and it raised itself up on one side, and had three ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it four wings of a fowl. The beast had also four heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Two important things. I'll stop there. You can see some similarities between the two dreams. There was four divisions in both. There was four parts to the image that Nebuchadnezzar had. There was four parts to this. It went in some order, but in both cases it was the fourth kingdom. There was the fourth aspect that was exceeding terrible, and both of them had 10 divisions. The fourth beast had 10 horns. You got to expect that he had 10 toes on his feet. And there was 10 divisions here and 10 divisions here. And so if we stop there, we might say, I could maybe draw some parallels between the vision that Nebuchadnezzar had to the vision that Daniel had. But we don't have to. You can turn to the next page. In my Bible, it's the next page. And here it is in chapter 7, verse 16, 15. This is after Daniel has seen this vision, and Daniel doesn't even understand exactly what it is. So it says, I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit in the midst of my body, and the visions of my head troubled me. I came near unto one of them that stood by, and asked of him the truth of all this. So he told me, and made me know the interpretation of these things. These great beasts, which are four kings, which shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever and forever, even forever and ever. Then I would know the truth of the fourth beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, and his nails of brass, which devoured, brake in pieces, and stamped the residue of his feet. And of the 10 horns that were on his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. What I'm wanting to, I don't want to try to cover the whole book of Daniel tonight. If you kept reading in chapter 8, you read about the ram and the goat, and I thought that Gabriel came and explained this, but Gabriel actually comes and explains the ram and the goat. That's what I was looking for. So I messed up. But Gabriel, the angel Gabriel, comes and explains that the first vision that Daniel has is of these kings that are coming. It's with Babylon, the head of gold. From Babylon, it's taken away and given to the Medians, the Medes and the Persians. If you read chapter 4, you will see it given to Darius the Mede. You've read Darius the Mede. If you look, you can look there right now. It's chapter 5, sorry. Daniel chapter 5, verse 31. Daniel chapter 5, verse 31. It says, and Darius the Median took the kingdom. He took it from Belshazzar. We will study this, but I have to get to this point tonight because this is what today it just made it so real to me. I want to go through what I've discovered, what I've hopefully understood, and I'll let you study it as much as you want to. In that first kingdom, in the kingdom of Babylon, that was portrayed as the gold head, when it came away from Nebuchadnezzar's house, it went to the Medians and the Persians. That would have been the silver. That would have been the second part of Daniel's dream. After them, historically, it went to the Grecians. Alexander the Great, if you remember anything from history. Alexander the Great was the Grecians. It went to him next. So we can see, not only reading in Scripture, we can go to a completely secular world history book and watch power transfer from the Babylonians to the Medians and the Persians. We can watch that transfer of power to the next kingdom, and to the next kingdom, which is the Grecians, coming out of Egypt. And then the fourth kingdom that is set up is the one of iron. It was the Roman Empire. And when I recognized that fourth part was the Roman Empire, it started coming together, recognizing that it was the Romans who crucified Jesus. It was in the reign of the Romans when that stone was cut out. The stone that was cut out of the mountain with no hands. And it fell and crashed on the iron part of that statue. It crushed the Roman Empire. We know that story. We know where it picks up from there. We recognize one thing completely after that is that Jesus Christ came and accomplished what is written in Daniel chapter 2, verse 44. Daniel chapter 2, verse 44. This is after he's interpreted that dream. He said it's gold, silver, brass, and iron. But he says, and in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. That's one of my favorite parts. It says the kingdom will not be left to other people. It will be his kingdom. It will be him as king. It will be the kingdom of heaven that will break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. It is in the book of Daniel that the start button was pressed. It says, you're here, next is this one, next is this one, then fourth is the Romans, and then it's my turn. I'm gonna... It's almost too great to recognize how it's in this Old Testament. When you read through the Old Testament, you recognize one certain inalienable, unfailable, just it never changes course, that God is orchestrating His glory. It is His purpose to do all of these things. I was telling Tutu and Matthew and Whitney and Nathan and Alicia this morning, as I've read, there's one thing I've discovered about the nation of Israel. They were not a very devoted, they didn't stay very long with a singleness of mind. They varied pretty quick. They hadn't hardly crossed the dry ground of the Red Sea before they started saying it'd been better if we'd have starved to death in Egypt rather than come out here. It says, what, were there not enough graves in Egypt that we had to come out here to be buried? It was not that He chose Israel for any value that they possessed. As I've read, and I intend to cover, I don't know how long it'll be before the next time we have this Bible study, but I intend to cover the Old Testament in its entirety very soon. It's been eye-opening. I've loved reading it. I've been disgusted with Israel. And then I'd recognize I could have been there. I could have probably been doing the same thing. And we recognize pretty quickly our own faults when we see other people that have failed in similar things. But when you recognize that Israel is not God's people, because Israel had a single favorable attribute. He didn't say, I'm going to pick you because you're the best. I'm going to pick you because you'll be obedient. I'm going to pick you because you'll be anything that would be admirable. When you start to recognize, God said, I'm going to do it with Abraham because I want to. It's with Abraham that I'm going to establish this. He could have done it with anybody else because they would have been just as pitiful at keeping His will. They would have gone in and out of His favor and in and out of His dominion and not dominion, in and out of His I guess just favor. But the one thing never failed. When it came time for God to say, you've experienced Israel, you've experienced, I don't know, maybe that's what's going to be revealed to me in the next chapters, in the next books of the Old Testament. At some point God said, that's enough of you trying to achieve righteousness. That's enough. All I had to do was prove to you that you'll never get there. And now it's time for me to orchestrate my plan. God knew the order of those kings. When we finish this book, there's some of the most terrifying scriptures in the whole Bible, in Daniel, where we recognize that Gabriel and Michael and the other angels are fighting, and they're swaying the minds of kings to make them do things to make sure that the will of God is accomplished. That's in this book. But we're not studying Daniel so that we have just a wonderful story. It's a wonderful story because we recognize that's God carrying out His will, and He's glorifying Himself in it. I just don't know what time it is. I left my phone.
4 minutes left.
Till 7. Shoot. We only covered one dream. We had others. Well, we got to 2 dreams. Nebuchadnezzar has a second dream. And in that dream, God got tired. I'm gonna read that, and maybe we'll close there. Maybe it's always good to have one scripture that just is good to quit with. In chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar has a second dream. If you've read through it, you know what I'm talking about. It says there's a great tree, and the tree's going to be cut down, all the fruit scattered, and the leaves are going to blow away, and nothing's going to be left except the stump of that tree, and the dew and the rain is going to fall on that. And it's a dream to Nebuchadnezzar about him losing everything. He's going to become. It describes him pretty seriously in verse 33. But Daniel explained that it was him, and it says, "Wherefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable unto thee, and break off thy sins by righteousness, and thine iniquities by showing mercy to the poor, if it may be a lengthening of thy tranquility." He says, stop doing what you're doing now, and maybe God will put this off. He said, it's going to be awful for you. Stop doing all these things, and maybe it'll be put off. Humble yourself, and maybe he'll lengthen your tranquility. And in verse 28 it says, "All this came upon the king Nebuchadnezzar. At the end of 12 months he walked in the palace of the kingdom of Babylon. The king spake and said, Is not this great Babylon that I have built for the house of the kingdom by the might of my power and for the honor of my majesty? And while the word was in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven saying, O King Nebuchadnezzar, to thee it is spoken, the kingdom is departed from thee, and they shall drive thee from the men." It goes down, it says, down in the verse 33, it says, "And he was driven from men and did eat grass as oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hairs were grown like eagle's feathers, and his nails like bird claws. And at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up mine eyes unto heaven, and mine understanding returned unto me, and I blessed the Most High. And I praised and honored him that liveth forever, whose dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. And all the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing, and he doeth according to his will in the army of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth. And none can stay his hand, or say unto him, What doest thou?" Nebuchadnezzar, it took him being snatched out of everything that he held dear, and God just said, before you go, I'm going to show you who's in charge of this place. He said, you're not going to last forever. There'll be others after you. There'll be, 4 kingdoms coming after you. But before you leave office, I'm going to make you eat grass. And Nebuchadnezzar was humble. And it took one king after him to go back just like it was. We'll pick up next time in chapter 5. We won't skip chapter 3. Chapter 3 is just an inserted chapter that breaks away from the story of Daniel and talks about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. In one of these Bible studies, we will go back and just highlight certain things like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in that furnace, Daniel in that den of lions. We'll go back and highlight just the miracles of God interceding. But right now, next time whenever we meet, I intend to pick up with chapter 5 to continue exploring God bringing about Christ entering the world. That's where we'll study next time, and then we'll start in chapter 5. So, as you read, I hope you're reading. I hope you'll go back. Most every one of us in this room have read Genesis and Exodus. And we turn the page and we start reading Leviticus, and we say, yeah, there's got to be something better than this. So we skip to something else. We go read Psalms. We go read Proverbs. We go read the New Testament. But I can say this. I did read through Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, made it through those 3 books that have a purpose. And understanding those 3 books has enlightened me to some of the other books that I've read. I want you to read those books. Put it on your phone. Put it on your iPad. Put it on your iPhone. Put it on something. And when you're going to sleep at night or before you're willing to get out of bed in the morning, just read it. Start reading and just don't stop. Read through it continuously. I encourage you to read the Old Testament. Where if we had a A+ in the New Testament, we'd probably have a C- in the Old Testament. So we got to fix that. So that's my encouragement. Until next time, that we'll just read. Do you have any thoughts? I spent a whole hour talking. I didn't open it up, not one time. As you read, did you experience anything that would help me? Because I have rejoiced in it, and I would, especially from Brother Ed or Brother Tom, anything that just either correction or admonition or something, anything.
We're talking about the feet of iron and clay. You mix things with the world, that's where the devil's going to hit you at too. He's going to destroy that foundation of your standing. And if you go back and study that, and when it started out, all of it built upon the foundation of clay, man's work, and the iron and everything. And that clay it was never wood bond. And so that stone, I mean, you cut the whole thing down when you got that, cut the feet out from under it. And to me, that's one of the things I see, that when you start mixing the world with the things of Christ, you've got a poor foundation on that thing. That's one thing I see. But you're right about that. When you go back to Rome, and he came at the right time, Rome was an iron nation. They had plenty of power, and everything was necessary, was in place for the word to be spread, and it's wonderful. He's doing a great job.
Anybody? Daniel doesn't, it's not a sequential book. It doesn't, chapter 1 doesn't necessarily come chronologically before or after. It seems like it bounces around some. So that's kind of what it took tonight to discuss just the visions, the dreams. But we will go back and hit the other ones. It won't be long until we're finished with Daniel, and we need to know where to go after that. If you're reading something and you say, let's study this, let's pursue that, maybe you should stand up here and do it. And that would be, I can honestly say, in my whole life, I've never experienced a more fruitful growth than when I had to prepare to speak. It's been more valuable to me to prepare to do this than it ever will be for you to listen to me. So I encourage you to read. So.
One thing I'd like to say, you go back, when you look at Nebuchadnezzar, you look at all the rest, trouble always come upon God's people and those round about when they fail to give him the praise, the honor, and the glory.
Amen.
And that's what's needed today among God's people.
Absolutely.
He needs to praise him and honor him because Nebuchadnezzar, he was praising himself. And you see what happened to him.
Another thing, this morning we had a Bible study lesson. We just started talking, and we talked about God establishing his covenant with Abraham. And that even though Israel was destroyed on multiple times, they were even, I never knew this, but the kingdom of Israel was divided against itself. The kingdom of Judah, which was one of the tribes of Israel, Judah, was separate from the others. Judah and Benjamin, the two, Judah and Benjamin were together, and the tribe of Judah fought against Israel. They fought amongst themselves for king against king when they were in disobedience. But even in all that, God never broke his covenant with them, but he did allow them to experience devastation for their disobedience. And I'm afraid that we may be headed for that judgment now in America. I don't think God will ever, his word is secure. He will not leave us or forsake us. We do have that rock of salvation, but it doesn't guarantee that we won't experience things like Israel did.
We leave them a lot of times.
Yes. Anything else? Well, we will just keep reading.
Thanks, Brother Jeremy. If you will, let's form our circle. Have a